the Agile process is very iterative. So this here shows that you'd have a need, you'd research, observe, brainstorm, experiment, revise, and then build it. So it's this pain point analysis that's ongoing for an iterative process. And the difference between Agile versus Waterfall, you would have heard of Waterfall just being the more traditional method where it's kind of staged out. It's just that it's in loops of sprints, blocks of sprints, instead of kind of this milestone, this milestone, this milestone. So it allows you to kind of shift the goalposts a little bit more with Agile and adapt to the changes you see in the product, that the customers are, giving you feedback. You can kind of be quicker, hence the word, in how you shift your goals and priorities and how you work. Because the way that you would work in an Agile team would be in sprints, and a sprint is usually 2 weeks, but could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, kind of depends on how you want to run the cycle. And it is basically a continuous backlog of work that you are prioritizing into those sprints with a goal for each sprint, and you continue to work through that as a team to say this sprint we're going to focus on retention, say, and then all of your tasks might be around retention, trying to fix that, trying to understand. And I think it's important that the product team isn't just working in the product. They should also be working on the landing page, the marketing, the journey all the way from understanding about how it works to signing up to using the product, and then continued support through that as well. But you can see from the little diagram there, we've got that plan, design, develop, test, deploy. That's sprint 1, and then it repeats. Now, hopefully I'm not moving too fast for everybody here. We then go into what's called Scrum, and it's basically the way that you work within Agile is called the Scrum process. And there's a few standard kind of meetings that kind of happen. So you have on the left here your discovery and your insights, which comes from your UX research and you're talking to customers and all those things I spoke about. From those you have user stories, and we've worked with user stories in creating the product, and that's how we've got our insights, already. They would go into a product backlog, and this is where the product owner, he or she would then prioritize those with the help of their team and put them into a product backlog for the sprint. So you've got this kind of long list of everything that you want to work on. Then the product owner will prioritize it, move it into the sprint, which will be based on whatever your roadmap is, whatever your goals are for that period or for that time. So that creates the sprint backlog, which then goes into your sprint cycle. And then you have what's called a daily scrum. So the normal methodology is that you do a stand-up every day with the team, and you talk about what worked, what didn't work, any blockers. You also have a sprint planning session at the beginning of every sprint, where you just are planning that backlog and what the goals are, and the team will be saying, I think this is going to take me X amount of time so I can do X, Y, and Z. Okay, John, here's your task. Sue, here's your task, just breaking it all down into the sprint. And then when the sprint ends, there's a retrospective to talk about, well, what's working, what's not working, how can we improve? And then it just goes on repeat, and that's kind of how sprints work in the Agile and Scrum format. And when I've worked at organizations, the whole organization doesn't have to work like this. Often you'll have a product team within, a different hierarchy, different organization, ways of working, could be waterfall outside of that. But if the team is empowered to work in this way for the digital product, it can still work as a standalone way of working. It's not something that every single team has to do. So a key part that I've spoken about a couple of times is the product roadmap. And this is an ever-changing, informative piece that the product owner owns. But obviously it leads in from the product strategy, which talks to the business strategy. But this should be based on business objectives, user objectives, and quarterly kind of planning where you need the product to be, where it needs to go. So that's just an example of one here. We can see quarter 1, quarter 2, sort of high level themes for the roadmap. They're not always going to be specific, because sometimes it's an idea of where you're going to go, and it might change and adapt. But the key thing is, once you launch, if you don't keep momentum and grow, the product will stagnate, and your competitors will continue to innovate, move, and they'll take the space.